Listening to the Sales Hunter podcast. Hey, have you ever had to negotiate regarding price? Oh, come on. Let's not kid ourselves. It comes up in the conversation every time we're trying to close a sale. The customer wants to negotiate over something. With me today, Stan Christensen, adjunct professor at Stanford. The amazing podcast, All Things Negotiation. Why am I talking? Let's get the show going right now.
You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast with Mark Hunter, where the focus is to help you as a sales leader sell with confidence and integrity. And now here's your host.
If you want to know how to negotiate, you get the expert. And that's who we have today. Stan Christensen, adjunct professor at Stanford for 23 years. And his podcast, you got to check it out, All Things Negotiation. Of course, that's after you've listened to the Sales Hunter podcast. Stan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Hey, let's dive right into it because it seems like negotiation comes up on every sales call, every time. And it always comes down to price. Give the listeners some hope, that they can get past it, or can they get past it?
Yeah, price is often one of the most important things, but it's usually not the most important thing. And there are always other things. So let's just break that down really quickly.
Oh, hey, can I stop you right there? That was powerful, what you just said. That just gave the audience a breath. They can breathe deeply now. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me say a couple things about timing on price. You want to talk about price only after you've talked about a bunch of other things. People that try to talk about price too early get stuck there because it's sort of like putting a stake in the ground if you're putting up a tent. And people feel like if they come off the anchor price that they either asked for or proposed, it's sort of painful. And it's hard to get creative outside of that. People tend to not want to talk about non-price things after price comes up. So that's one of the reasons you postpone it. The second key point is there are often more important things. I would say that the relationship tends to be more important than the short-term price. How many, Mark, of your all the people you've trained, and it's hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, how many of them only sell to people once in a one-off situation and they're never going to see that buyer again? How often does that happen?
Probably very rarely. Very rarely. There's always another sale. There's always another connection. There's always another conversation.
Yeah, I would say it's less than 1%. Yet most people negotiate as if it were a one-time, one-off situation. And so what you want to do is think about relationship management. You have me on here because I'm a negotiation expert, and that sounds exciting and sexy, and we can talk about some of the stories when I was a professional negotiator. But if I had framed myself as a relationship manager, would you have had me on the podcast?
No, you'd be boring. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what I do at Stanford is I teach relationship management, and I call it negotiation. It's a little bit of a sleight of hand. But I think that people who are good at building friendships, people who have good relationships with their families, people who are in long-term relationships tend to do the same with their customers. And so I think the first thing, Mark, that we ought to be teaching is how to be in relation with the client as opposed to how to extract value from the client.
Okay, now you've said a lot there because I really believe that if we're in relation with the client, they're going to be more open. They're going to be more forthcoming with us. And that lends to a much smoother negotiation process if we even have to get into a negotiation.
Yeah, you are in a negotiation. And let me just define negotiation from my perspective and how I teach it. It's any attempt to persuade or influence another party. Okay, so if you define it that broadly, all of us have negotiations every day. It doesn't need to be something that's intimidating. Negotiation isn't widely taught, and so most people sort of negotiate based on their own personal style. And if you're a tough guy, you maybe pound the table and scream and yell. And if you're a manipulative person, maybe you manipulate. If you're just a transactional person, maybe you just look to transact. When in reality, it can be all of those things. But the horizontal thing that permeates all of them is relationships. And so that's what we ought to be teaching first. And you point to something that's important, which is if you get to know them and they get to know you, you want to help each other. I've worked on, political conflicts, ethnic conflicts, hostage negotiations, and I've literally never met a person on the other side of the table that I couldn't empathize with, that I couldn't find something in common with. Yet we tend to treat people like they're a terrorist, like they're a used car dealer. And that just doesn't work. And that leads me to my next point, which is often negotiation is taught in tactics. How many tactics can you use to increase the price on the other side. Now, let's say that you, Mark, use some good tactics and are able to extract some value and get an out-of-market price for your product. Is that client going to find out likely that they overpaid?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. I don't know.
In my experience, people tend to find out. These days,
Okay.
information is more transparent. It's easy
Okay,
to
that's fair. Yeah.
talk to competitors. It's easy to get information off the internet. And so you're not looking to maximize price in the short term. And this is an important point, which is if you do a fair deal with them, they are likely to want to continue to transact with you. And so you want to look at the long-term value of the relationship as opposed to the short-term value. That's the key there in the negotiation.
I love what you're saying there, because I love to say that we don't close a deal, we open a relationship, because there's always the next one. This is exactly what you're talking about there. And I got to go back, because you use the word tactics, and that's what everybody always equates to negotiations.
Yep.
But you said you did some hostage negotiating. Now, that's got to be more tactically oriented, I would think, right? Or not?
Surprisingly not. So people like to hear stories about hostage negotiations, but in reality, those are some of the easiest. When is the last time that you heard about hostages being taken and the people who took the hostages, the hostage takers, got whatever they were asking for, flew off in a jet and lived happily ever after? Like, it just doesn't go well for hostage takers.
I saw it in a
These
movie
things,
one time.
yeah, in a movie, right? And that's where most people get their advice about how to negotiate, is movies. The reality is most people who take hostages are desperate. They just want to get their message out. They just want to be heard. They feel like they are disempowered, disenfranchised. And so honestly, listening skills is the key in hostage negotiations. And so those aren't the tough ones. What are the tough ones? The tough ones are family business negotiations. People say, what are the hardest things you've ever worked on? When families turn against each other, it can be really brutal. And so for your audience, the important thing to think about is treat people, whether it is going to be one or two times that you transact or a lifetime of transactions, as if you were going to see them again. Have you ever, you and I are probably about the same age. Have you ever run into someone randomly that you hadn't seen in 30 years? It was someone that you never thought you'd see again. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah. I've had that happen several times. Yeah. Run into somebody from college. Yeah. Or high school.
Yeah. And maybe you treated them really well and you have a great relationship, and maybe you didn't. If it was like some of the people I treated poorly in high school and I saw them, 40, 50 years later, I'm embarrassed. The first thing I want to do is apologize. And so I think you want to assume that you're going to see them again, you're going to transact with them again, and price is one of many issues. It's not the issue.
Okay, now that's fascinating, because again, you said price is not the issue and so forth, but there's something else there. Is there a mindset that we have to enter into? Because you said everything is negotiation, everything. Is there a mindset that we have to have when we know we're getting into this period of having to negotiate?
Yeah, there are a bunch of things here. Let me focus on just one of them. Rather than focus on what you're going to say or advocacy in negotiation, you want to focus on what you can learn or inquiry in the negotiation. So every negotiation I go in with a list of questions. And those questions might surface things that change my approach, right? So let's say you're selling a widget, and this widget you're selling is for $100. And you'd be really happy with $110. That would just, make your number, okay? And they come in off the bat and they say, look, let's just cut through it. We'll pay $120 for that widget. What's your response?
I'm like, inside, I'm shocked. I'm like, yeah, I want to take the offer, but what's something behind that? What's driving this? What did I miss?
That's perfect, which is you're making some assumption that is wrong, right?
Mhm.
Either about what they think of as a fair price, what their budget is, what their incentives are. And so what you want to do is go in with those questions, learn about their organization, learn about the individual's incentives and how those might be different than the organization's incentives. We could talk about that. And so you want to go in with a curiosity, an inquiring mind, and learn things that might change the approach that you take, where you can do better on price and, more importantly, better on the relationship in the long term.
Wow, you said something very powerful there, because so many times we, the salesperson, believe value is what we perceive it to be. Totally irrelevant. It's what the customer perceives it to be. And again, their perception of value could be totally different because they have a different need for it. They have a different purpose.
Let's focus
Are
on what you said. Let me just say one thing because you're saying something powerful there. They have a different need. Let's just underline that. It turns out that often we have complementary interests. We think we care about the same thing. We want a high price, they want a low price. But there may be things that aren't price oriented that we can give on and help them. And anytime in a negotiation you can help the other side and have it not cost you very much, that's a win-win. And so you want to look for those opportunities. My mentor was Roger Fisher, who wrote the book Get Into Yes and started the Harvard Negotiation Project. And I would observe him at the end of negotiations, both sides have settled, both sides are happy. He would often throw something in and say, as I think about your situation, what if we just did this little extra thing for you guys? And they're waiting for what do you want from us? And he would say nothing. It was just a little bone for them. And so how do you think they felt the next time they had to negotiate with Roger?
Oh, they felt unbelievable. It almost like he had the upper hand suddenly.
Well, and he did something for me that he didn't need to. Am I going to try to squeeze him? Then think of a person that squeezed you sometime. In your long career, someone has tried to cut the deal too thin for you, not cared about your interest. How are you going to feel about them the next time? Are you going to let them cut you thin next time?
I'm going to be very defensive about them, and I'm going to try to avoid them if at all possible. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to not negotiate with him, but if you have to, if you're compelled to, you're going to start high. And you're not going to look for a fair deal because you feel like you were taken advantage of the last time. And so anytime you have the opportunity to take advantage of another party, pause. Some assumption you are making and or that they are making is coming into conflict, and you need to drill down and ask questions and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, let's flip this around a little bit, because what happens to that salesperson that's sitting in front of a customer who the customer has written all over their face they're going to try to take advantage of the salesperson, and they are just being brutal with the salesperson. How does the salesperson respond to that? How do they work their way through that situation?
Well, can you think, let's try to role play it. Why don't you be the tough customer and I'll be the sales guy? So, say some tough things and I'll disentangle that for you.
Yeah, I'm not, what you sold us 5 years ago, that's the maximum price we're going to pay today. I don't care about inflation. I don't care what's changed. That's the price we're paying. It was 5 years ago when we placed the last order. That's what we're paying.
Hey, Mark, totally understand where you're coming from. And the most important thing in our interaction today is that we build on our very, what I feel like is a productive, positive relationship. I mean, as I talk about you to folks internally, I say, Mark is a guy we can trust. We're looking out for each other's interests. We're not going to take advantage of them. They're not going to take advantage of us. That's kind of how we see you guys internally. I'm guessing you guys see us that way, but let me just check that assumption. You feel like it's a pretty good relationship?
Well, yes, but I've got options. I've got other vendors who are coming in here all the time who can provide me with really what I'm looking for at a much better price than what you've put on the table right now.
Absolutely. We know you've got good alternatives, and we know our competitors have great products. Ours are better, and I want to talk a little bit about why they're better. But you and I are professionals. If we can't come up with a price and a product that is better than you can come up with to our competitors, you should walk. That would be rational. But I guarantee you we can get this deal closed. And I want to hear to talk about that today.
Okay, go ahead and talk. Now,
Well,
I love what you're doing there. I love it because you're not talking price at all. You're not talking the product or anything. You're emotionally somewhat tugging on me, right?
yeah. A follow-on that I often would say in a situation like this, just one thing for your listeners, is fairness is a very important criteria. People want to be treated fairly. Okay. And so if someone's pushing me really hard, I'll say to them often, I probably do this once a week, do you want more than is fair? And very few people will say, yeah, we want an unfair deal for our side. We don't care about your side. We only care about interest. So what they'll say is, yeah, we want a fair deal. Well, that's great because we do too. Now, we may differ in our view of fairness, but let's explore what would be some ways of determining fairness, some objective criteria. Would it be market standards? Would it be what we paid 5 years ago, as the example that you articulately brought up? And so you want to bring in objectivity to the situation as opposed to positioning around numbers.
I love that. I love that. Now, let's move further along in the sales process. When would you put the offer on the table? When would you ultimately stop tugging on the emotional heartstrings and fairness and kind of put an offer on the table. And how
Only
would
if
you
it
doing that?
only after it met the following criteria. And I have a framework for this that, again, largely came from Roger Fisher and the Harvard Negotiation Project. So you want to explore each other's interests. That would be one criteria. You want to creatively problem solve and see if you can get the optimized best deal on the table. You want to, as I mentioned, bring in objective criteria. You want to make sure that it's better than either of you could do if you walked away, in his case to his competitor, to your case to trying to sell to somebody else. You want the relationship to have been improved through the process of negotiation. And then the communication piece, which I referred to earlier, you want there to be a good dialogue, good back and forth. If it is better than your alternative, you've done all those other 6 things, that's the time to nail the price down and close the deal, not before.
Wow. Okay. So those 6, you would not put an offer on the table before you got answers to those 6, or you felt that you've achieved those 6, correct?
That's correct. And let me do one follow-up. Let's say they throw out the offer. We're not willing to pay more than X. So that's a frequent tactic, and people anchor high. The right response to there, or a good response to that, is, look, before we get to price, that might be something we'd agree to, but I think what we should do is explore these other areas and see what we can do as a package of issues. Price is never the only issue. I mentioned that right up front. And so you want to get at the other issues so you can look at a package deal rather than a one-off deal.
Wow, that's good. Hey, now a lot of people listen to this on 2x speed. So can you run through those 6 again real quick? Just for those people, they don't have to go back 35 seconds and get that 6 again.
Sure. And if they want to get a longer version, buy the book Getting to Yes. But they are the following: interests. What do you care about, or what do they care about? That's the first element. The second element, options. These are possible pieces of a deal that you can do together. Alternatives are what you each could do independently if you walked away. Criteria are objective standards that are independent of what each side's position is. It's bringing in outside objective standards. Relationship is how do you work together now? How do you work together in the future? And then finally, communication. Have you learned from them? Have you listened? We tend to be better at broadcasting than listening, and listening for key things to help you be a creative problem solver. So those are the 6. And then finally, you'd commit after you're really solid on those.
That's huge. And of course, I'm sure you talk about that on your podcast, All Things Negotiation, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It's just quickly on the podcast, it's really me interviewing people like you that are very successful, have had good careers, and pulling out the negotiation lessons for their life. How did they hire people? How do they deal with customers? How do they fire people? How did they raise capital? How did they sell their company? And so you're hearing from entrepreneurs, usually, sometimes academics, sometimes foreign policy folks, but it's a great school for education.
That's great. Hey, I want to come back to something that you touched on way back a long time ago on the show. You said where you try to find something that maybe is of value to them, but is of low cost to us. I've always felt that's a great goal. How do we uncover those?
Inquiry. So this is the part where you've got to understand what's important to them. And so the first thing I do, in a direct answer to your question, is I would go in with some ideas of what I think is important to them as kind of a straw man, and I'd put it on the table and I'd say, look, I've thought about your company and your situation. I assume you care about X, Y, and Z. Now, if those aren't the things they care about, are they going to let you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're going to say, no, Mark, that's not at all. Our incentives don't work that way. Our product cycle is different than that. You just learned a bunch of stuff. Now, they're much more willing to do that than if you just said, hey, tell us what's important to you. Then they get nervous. They feel like they have to kind of hide the cards. But if you throw out, a straw man or a draft, they'll react to it almost always.
Thank you. You're uncovering something that I firmly believe, that we get the best information early on in the sales process because the customer's relaxed. They don't feel any pressure. They're, like, I got to hold back on these cards. Is that what you firmly embrace in your course?
No question. What in North American culture, you and I are both in North America, but both of us have worked a lot overseas. We tend to be transactional. Let's get down to the brass tacks quickly. Let's give a contrasting culture. Mexico. I've done a lot of work in Mexico. If you show up at a business meeting, shake some guy's hand and sit down and say, let's negotiate, what do you think he or she is going to say?
Nope.
Hey, what about dinner?
That's
what
right.
about you got to meet my family. Mexicans tend to be, in Latin American cultures, often are relational. And so they want to get a sense for who they're dealing with as opposed to a number. And I think I don't want to get on a tangent here on your podcast, but currently we in this country are probably more transactional than we've ever been, particularly the current administration. And I just think what that does is burn bridges. You might get short-term gains, particularly if you have power in a negotiation, but people have long-term memories for being taken advantage of. And I'm guessing you have half a dozen people in your life who you feel like didn't treat you with the utmost of fairness and respect. And you remember their names, you remember the situation. People just don't like to be disrespected. And so the danger of having power and using it for short-term transactional gains is a long-term relationship failure.
I love what you're saying there because trust is without a doubt a key component of not only life, but business negotiation. And in the absence of trust, then it's low price. Low price is everything. And that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't benefit anybody. Yeah.
No, it's look, the metaphor there from foreign policy is it's an arms race, right? And it spirals to the bottom quickly. And so what we want to do is if things start to spiral, you want to halt the spiral, right? You want to be the first person to interject and intervene. A common negotiation strategy that you'll hear about in theoretical circles is tit for tat. You just mimic what they do, and then it'll all work out in the end. And that's just one of the worst strategies I've ever heard. It basically doesn't give any attention to the relationship. And so what you want to do is you want to be the person that breaks the cycle of mistrust or breaks the cycle of violence if you're in a war situation, as opposed to be righteous or be correct or be powerful. That just, you end up with less profit or a lot of dead people.
Wow, that's powerful. Hey, I'm sure we could talk for hours because I'm sure you've got some fascinating negotiation stories from your situations all over the world, but your podcast, All Things Negotiation, can't stress enough. You got to check it out, subscribe to it. And you're an adjunct professor at a great school, Stanford. So yeah, I think you know what you're talking about. How else can people find you? How else can people follow and learn from you?
Yeah, I think just the standard social channels. So we have a YouTube channel, All Things Negotiation. I'm on LinkedIn, happy to link with people there. And I release a couple of video clips each week. Instagram, just stand.negotiation. So any of those sources.
Great. We've been talking today, Stan Christensen, All Things Negotiation, the podcast, fascinating conversation on negotiation. And you may sense that there was a little bit of bait and switch at the beginning, but that's really what negotiation is all about. So Stan, I want to say thank you for being on the show. You've been listening to the Sales Hunter podcast. What is it? 2 episodes a week. One like this, where we do a deep dive with a subject matter expert. Second episode, short single topic from just me. Hey, why do we do the podcast? Is to help you see and achieve what you didn't think was possible. Do me a favor, leave me a review on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you on the next episode. Great selling.